Hello, troublemakers. Welcome to this week's episode of Resolved Labor Podcast. I am your host, Lynn Fields, and this week we will be highlighting Sue Ko Lee. Sue Ko Lee was born March 9th, 1910. Shout out to the Pisces. And just in case you guys are wondering, I am March 10th, so yeah, put that on your calendars. She was born in Honolulu, Hawaii. She was the oldest of 10 children. Jeez, my back hurt just thinking about it. At some point in her life, her family moved to Watsonville, California, where Sue was raised. She was 18 when she married a cutie named Lee Ju Hong, a Chinese immigrant who worked as a bookkeeper for natural dollar stores. Sue took a job at the same factory along with several family members. So you guys at the time, I guess this national dollar store or whatever, like they would hire, a lot of, Chinese immigrants. And it was an American owned dry goods store chain. It was kind of like Dollar General, Family Dollar, and they operated on the West Coast from 1906 to 1996. The store was founded by a guy named Joe Shung. Joe Shung was born in a Chinese village of Long Tao Wan. According to his daughter, he sold eggs in China and immigrated to the U.S. when he was 18 or 19 without any relatives. And Joe landed in Vallejo, California, and worked in a garment factory. In 1901, he opened a store in Vallejo with three of his friends. The store sold clothes and household goods and at a really low prices. He was one of the first Chinese American millionaires. So a lot of the Chinese immigrants worked for these Chinese business owners, but they all lived together in this tight-knit immigrant community. Like the communities were really, really tight, and there were a lot of family and friendship ties, because the bosses and the workers, their kids went to the same schools, the same churches, stuff like that. And so this made it kind of complicated, at the work site. And it made, these personal relationships made a lot of workers hesitant to speak out against poor treatment. Now, in the 1930s, the International Ladies Garment Workers Union was working really hard to organize Black, Latino, and Asian American workers. And laws under the New Deal had established a minimum wage and legal protections for unionizing. So this empowered, a lot of the workers, and it empowered the union to want to expand their ranks. In San Francisco, the Ladies Garment Workers Union was concerned about Chinese-owned factories undercutting white-owned shops by basically paying their workers less and charging lower prices for the work. The union was struggling to organize the Chinese workers until this chick named Jenny Matthias entered the chat. Now, Jenny Matthias was an immigrant herself from Hungary, and she worked really hard to gain the trust of the community and the workers. And this wasn't easy because Chinese workers had a complicated history, they really had a complicated history with the labor movement. So troublemakers, just follow along with me when I say complicated, right? So a bunch of the unions at this time, they supported what was called the Page Act of 1875 and the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. So both of these, they basically, restricted immigration from China. And the argument was that Chinese workers would undercut the gains of white workers and the union gains, by accepting lower pay. Pause. Please, 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 can we stop? You guys see, the narrative here, right? So, the establishment, they like to use racism, to separate us, basically. And so this is an old trick, and so we need to recognize it when we see it. So this tension caused, Chinese and Chinese Americans to be locked out of a lot of unionized factories. See, this is where we messed up because we let the bosses separate us, right? So Sue Lee was working as a buttonhole machine operator at this factory. And remember, her husband works there too. So she was making 25 cents an hour. So even though the owner of the dollar store, remember our guy Joe, well, he's not our guy, but the other side's guy. So Joe was Chinese. He hired Chinese workers, but the pay was low and the working conditions were, of course, very poor. And in 1938, Sue and her co-workers voted to join the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, Local 341. The union demanded $20 per week for 35 hours a week. So the factory was like, no, we ain't doing none of that. But then eventually, because again, this is a tight knit community. You got to look these people in the face every day. The factory was like, bet, here's a tentative agreement. Then the owners, so they sold, basically they signed the tentative agreement, and then the owners sold the factory to some quote managers. They were like, oh, we're going to sell the factory to our boys over here. Now they had already voted to unionize, and as soon as they voted to unionize, Joe Shung was like, selling the business. So in response to the selling of the business, the workers was like, nah, fuck this. They saw this as an attempt to get out of the tentative agreement. So they walked out and went on strike. And with the help of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, ILGWU, that's a lot, y'all. The American-born and the Chinese workers went on strike together. Sue and the other strike leaders organized strike lines and picket lines, and they made breakfast and coffee for the strikers. And during the strike, Sue and the other women walked the line and organized picket shifts and spoke out at public meetings. So the strike had been, going on for about 13 weeks. And then the white retail clerks, they started supporting the strike and refused to cross the picket line. And this is what really caught the boss's attention. So this action actually shut down the store for about 2 weeks. This pushed the owner to settle the contract. The workers won a 5-cent raise, a 40-hour work week, enforcement of health, fire, and sanitary conditions, and a guarantee that manufacturing would provide work a minimum of 11 months out of the year.
This is Elise Bryant from the Labor Heritage Power Hour. We're proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
Now, this victory, troublemakers, it was really, really short-lived. And when I mean short-lived, the contract was only good for 1 year. And after that 1 year, the company conveniently went out of business, like having an out-of-business sale, come and get them if you want it. This tactic was a common practice, and it remains a threat to workers today. Like, in fact, in 2015, CBS News reported that, Walmart never opened 5 stores in Texas and Oklahoma and Florida due to plumbing issues. So this affected about 2,200 workers. And in February 2005, a Walmart in Canada was accused of closing, after workers had voted to unionize. And I'm telling y'all right now, if y'all think that this ain't happening right now at Wally World, it is absolutely happening today in this year of our universe, 2024. The Canadian Labor Board found in favor of the workers in court. Now, don't be sad, troublemakers. Although this campaign, that Suko Lee really worked hard on, although some people might call the campaign a failure, it was actually critical in the starting of breaking down the racial barriers in San Francisco as far as the Chinese and the Chinese American workers. The union helped find the displaced workers jobs outside of Chinatown, in fact, in the white shops, and these shops actually paid them more. So the workers actually got to come up out of this. Many Chinese workers took leadership roles in the union, and Sue became a business agent at another garment factory union and a delegate with the International Ladies Garment Workers Union National Convention. Sue and her husband, they had 2 children together, Merwin and Stanley. And you can actually go on YouTube and see a video of one of her sons, talking about her and her work. Sue died on May 15th, 1996 of cancer in El Cerrito, California. She was 86 years old. And that, Troublemakers, is our very, short story about Sue Coley. And I know y'all are probably thinking, like, what the hell? Like, that was like really, really short, but, yeah, it was. But guess what? Her role, no matter how small we might think it was, or her story, it still matters because it is one of the bricks that laid the foundation of this movement. And for that, she should be recognized. And I want to, basically, I wanted to get across to you guys that no matter how small you think your role is in your union right now, right? Whether it be, as a steward, or rather you're just a member that pays your dues regularly and comes to the meetings and comes to that rally, or wears that button or wears that bracelet in solidarity with the union. It matters. It counts. People see it, right? And that is really what I wanted to get across. So now, Troublemakers, comes the part in the show where we give our flowers. And this week, we will be giving our flowers to the wonderful Elise Bryant. So let me tell y'all something. So a few years ago, I'm at my very first Labor Notes conference, right? And I am just chilling. I'm listening to the music because, y'all probably have figured out, right, that I'm kind of a hippie. And so I like anytime there's music, people, if anybody's like sitting in a circle singing songs, that's probably where you'll find me. And so I'm hearing this beautiful voice and I'm hearing this person sing because I love people that can sing because I cannot sing. And I look over and I see this beautiful woman with these long silver dreadlocks, and she's got this beautiful voice and she's got this gorgeous smile. And I don't even know who the hell she is, but I'm just thinking like, that's who I want to be when I grow up. I want to be the one that's sitting in this circle with these long silver dreads, just chilling, with my peeps, right? And I later found out that it was Elise Bryant. And, the more I learned about her, the more in awe I became of her. And Elise is a Michigan girl. She started her labor activism when she joined the organizing committee of the International Workers of the World, the Wobblies. And she successfully organized the college bookstore at the University of Michigan. And it was through her activism in the local that she caught the attention of the director of the Labor Studies Center at the University of Michigan. And he hired Elise part-time to coordinate a labor theater project and eventually moved her into the full-time position of program associate for the Union Minorities Women Leadership Training Program at the University of Michigan's Labor Studies Center. And for over 18 years, she served Michigan's trade union community as both an educator and a cultural worker. Elise is very proud to be a longtime member of the IWW. She organized Michigan's first Latino Workers Leadership Institute and coordinated the Michigan Summer School for Women Workers, as well as the Black Men in Unions Institute. Elise is also the founder of the DC Labor Chorus, and she has served as the executive director of the Labor Heritage Foundation, and she is currently the president of the International Coalition of Labor Union Women, aka CLUE. Yes, Troublemakers, we know all about CLUE. So this amazing woman would be your president if you go ahead and just join CLUE, because like I already told y'all, they are still very active, they are still very much relevant, and they are still very much the bomb. CLUE is where the cool kids are, I promise you. And that is our episode for this week. Don't forget to follow us. Don't forget to follow us, like us, rate us. And if you want to give your flowers to a member of your union, a member of your community that you would like to, give flowers to, please write us. Please write us at resolvedlaborpod@gmail.com. We would be honored to read one of your letters on a future episode. Thanks for listening, Troublemakers. As always, peace and solidarity. This week's episode of Resolved Labor Podcast is produced by the Create Place Studio. You can find them on all social media platforms at The Create Place STL. We Won is performed by Joe Jinks and written by John O'Connor. This has been Resolve Labor Podcast. As always, peace and solidarity.
Everybody come and join in the union. Begin. Stand together to overcome soon, and we win.